Hi, welcome to another video. Now, I am still doing my videos around walking down memory lane, which I think is really important for me to do, and I think that quite a few people on my channel find interesting. Because I don't think it's very often that people delve into their diaries and share them online. But I think it's really important for me to reflect on my life and the things that I went through. And to be honest, there was a lot of things that happened to me all at once. And see, I was going to do another installment, but I feel as though the last episode was it kind of ended abruptly. Because I was talking about the moment my mother died and the entries that I wrote on the day and the day after and the few days after that. And I just wanted to talk about that. Like, I wanted to dedicate one whole video just talking about my mother's illness, her death, and my feelings around it. Now, I think I've talked about my mother in other videos, and I think the first thing that will become clear is that my mother and I were not close. I think that we were, and I've made several posts about this as well, on my blogs, on Twitter, on my old account, on my new account. I genuinely feel as though my mother and I were just too different to really, be best friends, for example. She was someone who wasn't, well, at least presented herself as a very domestic human being. Like, she liked sewing and cooking, and she was very, very feminine and girly, and I was just everything that wasn't that. I had my taste in the arts. I enjoyed cooking and I enjoyed textiles, but I'm a bit of a chaotic human being, and my mother was not that. She was very much an ordered, following instructions kind of person, and I am just a tornado. So even if we were cooking together, I was constantly being told off because I do everything super fast and efficiently, and I don't measure things in bowls and use a sieve to sift flour and things like that. Like, I things like that would really piss her off. So I would often be put on like peeling duty because that was the only thing she couldn't like police me on, and she would do the rest of it. And it was just like, Mom, I can cook. And she'd be like, yeah, but you make a huge mess. And I'd be like, yeah, but I clean it up afterwards. She was like, no, you were meant to clean it up. You get the point. She was just one of those people. I was like that in textiles as well. And I feel as though textiles was one of those things that I just learnt to be patient with, because I realized I couldn't just bang out a dress in a day. Like, it just wasn't doable, which is something that I absolutely attempted and absolutely failed at. And my mother berated me for it because she was like, I told you you can't do that. And I was like, look, I wanted to try that. Give me credit for that. And she was like, no, you completely failed. You don't get credit for trying and failing. You get credit for listening to me. So yeah. I feel as though a lot of our very intimate discussions were just arguments. I feel like that's genuinely how me and my mother bonded, and that was our relationship. I was her oldest child. I was her oldest daughter. I guess I was like her little project. Which, makes sense. I don't really blame her for that. I get it. But I was too much of a boyish person for her liking. I liked very boyish things. I've always liked very boyish things, or things that are considered boyish. And it was one of the biggest dividing points for me and my mother, because there were just some things that she just couldn't get behind. Like, she just couldn't understand. Like, why do you like playing football? I don't know. It's fun. Why do you always go and hang out with Hamza? I don't know, he's my cousin, he's my age, he's cool, and if you're a Muslim, or you were a Muslim and you're watching my channel, you'd know that cousins aren't mahram. So at one point we just got into a huge fight because Hamza was like my best friend, and I just had to stop hanging out with him. I needed to wear like a scarf around him and not talk to him as much, and it just got really awkward. And my mum, like, I feel like she wanted to understand, but at the same time she was like, no, you have to be like this. I used to hang out with a lot of my uncles when I was younger. I used to play a lot of video games. I used to play a lot of Mortal Kombat and that DC game with all the superheroes. It was like a one-on-one combat game. I've forgotten what it's called. It's been such a long time, but I remember I could pick X-Men, and I would always pick Storm or Wolverine. And I used to hang out with all of my uncles. And then when I reached a certain age, my mom was kind of like, "You shouldn't really hang out with your uncles as much. You're a girl. You should hang out with other girls." And I was kind of restricted to sitting in the kitchen and listening to everybody gossip, and it was just mind-numbing, because it's not engaging conversation. It's just bitching about people in our family, and I hated that. I've always hated that. I've never liked that, and I don't understand why it still happens. From what I hear, I'm still the talk of the town, so excellent. But yeah, my mother and I were not close. But when she got ill, I was in my final year of sixth form, which would be like American high school for those of y'all Americans who are watching. So I was in my final year of A levels, and I remember that entire year I only went into school for exams and to hand in my coursework. I went into school maybe a total of 10 to 15 days, that whole year, because that whole year my mother was going to the GP, going to the hospital. She was ill, and I was looking after my siblings. And I don't want to sit here and make anyone feel uncomfortable. So if you don't want to watch this, please feel free to just leave. Dislike and leave. Like, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, because every time I kind of bring it up in person, people are immediately like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, no, I need to talk about this. Like, this is part of the healing process for me, because I hid, for fuck's sake, I hid those feelings away for 5 years. I did not grieve for the death of my mother for 5 years. And it's really created some problems for me mentally and in my general life. And I need to get over it, Maybe to a point I never will, because it was a very traumatic time for me. And sometimes there's just no getting rid of that. There's diminishing it and it becoming less of a big problem, but I don't think I'll ever truly stop feeling that. It was really hard, Sit here crying. I don't want to cry. But yeah, one of the reasons why I kind of use this as an outlet is because I'm very reserved in terms of my emotions in real life. I don't like talking about how I feel. I don't. I feel like it's a waste of time. And if I didn't have to address it, I wouldn't. For someone who, I'm not to toot my own horn here, but for someone who is as emotionally intelligent as I am, it's actually quite astounding how much I don't want to talk about my emotions. And I understand that I need to. Like, I get that, but at the same time, I fucking hate it and I don't want to do it. But I need to, and this is part of the process of me getting over it, especially as I dive through this journal, which is just, I feel as though it's just going to get sadder and sadder until I get to a point where I was just a dumb kid doing dumb kid shit. But, so, I suspect that my mother was ill well before her period of diagnosis. She was definitely ill before her period of diagnosis, but I think it was well before, because my mother had my youngest sibling in the February of 2013, and she died in that same year. She died in December of 2013. So I suspect that she had cancer, so she had stomach cancer. I suspect she had it for a while, or even before she got pregnant with my youngest brother. She was diagnosed in June of 2013, and by that point it was in its fourth stage. She was told she has 6 months to live, which was accurate, it turned out. So, yeah, that whole year, it was her being put into hospital. It was her going in and out of appointments. It was her going through chemotherapy, and it was her dying. And I think there were loads of points between those things that made me sad, made me angry, made me annoyed, made me frustrated, that I just refused to acknowledge. Like, when I say I'm manipulative, I mean it in the best possible way. Because I don't think I could ever be as deceitful as I was back then. Because the rage and the sadness that I held in myself that nobody saw for the whole year that my mother was dying, I personally think I should get an award for being a fucking liar. For someone who was 17 years old, okay, my father's a psycho. He's always been a psycho. And he was a psycho when my mother was dying. My family, who were being purely just the worst fucking human beings alive, and 5 young children that I had to look after. For all of that, and for me, never crying in front of anybody, never showing anyone my anger, just being the epitome of calm. Even as everyone broke down around me, I was a fucking liar. And that's why I say that I could never have achieved that if I wasn't manipulative. I could never have done it, and honestly, I don't know how I feel about it. I feel as though I would be more mentally sound if I had let it all out, but I couldn't. My father was falling apart, him already being a fucking mess, he was falling apart, my siblings were falling apart, like my brothers, like my mom was in hospital so much that my brothers had basically forgotten her, and they had assumed me to be their mother, so anytime she was in the house, they would just hide, and it was heartbreaking for her, for them, for me, but I couldn't show it. My mother was dying, so she was falling apart in a mental sense as well as a physical sense. And my whole, like, extended family, everyone was falling apart. And I was the only thing that was keeping it together. And not that I want credit, because honestly, I don't give a fuck about my family, because they're awful human beings. But I was never acknowledged for keeping it together as well as I did for years. Like, the mess that you see in this book, this was never a mess in person. The mess only came out in the book. It only came out in the book because it was the only place that I felt safe to let it out. I couldn't show it to my siblings. I couldn't show it to my mother. I couldn't show it to anybody. There were select incidents while my mother was dying over a year where I really wanted to just lose it, but I couldn't, because I felt responsible, not for my mother dying, obviously, but for everybody else. I felt like I needed to keep it together because everybody else was losing it. Jesus, let me get the worst one out of the way. Let's get that one out of the way. So there was one incident. I'm gonna be crying throughout this whole video. I hate this. I hate crying, but I always do it. It's what I need to do. It's the only way I can achieve catharsis, apparently. My nose is running and I don't have any tissues. I've run out. So there was one incident. So my mother was ill, and because the cancer was in her stomach, she couldn't eat anything like through her mouth. She just couldn't. So they had put a tube in her nose to like give her liquid food and things like that. And I think she had gotten her tube refitted, and I think the nurse, I don't know what happened, but the nurse had made a mistake and there was like a little leak in the tube, so none of the food was going through her, like through her body. It was just pouring out of this leak. And like, my mother kind of just freaked out. Like she just started bawling, she started crying, and she was screaming and she was cursing, and she was just, you know, she was dying and she was upset. That was it. Like she wasn't cursing at me or cursing at the nurse. She was just cursing her luck. Like, I'm dying and this has happened and everything is going wrong and everything is falling apart and I'm dying. You know, she just lost it. And the entire time I just stood there. I just stood there and I held her and I let her just do her thing. And I so desperately wanted to cry with her. But I couldn't, because I knew if I cried, it would make it so much worse, because then she would be guilty because she was dying and it's not her fault. Like, I wish instead of crying now, I had done it then, because I feel like this is less valid now. I don't know. This is what I mean. Like, I cannot acknowledge my emotions. I can't ever feel good about doing this. It always feels bad. It always feels wrong. But that's an incident that really sticks out while she was dying. When that went wrong, we had to rush her back to the hospital, and it's quite a strenuous task to put a tube up an adult's nose, because they have to put it through your nose, take it out of your mouth, and then shove it down your throat. It's really, really stressful, and she had just gotten that done, and there was a leak in it, and it just ruined her. Like, she just couldn't take it, collectively, with everything else, because she had so many things done to her by that point. She was also going through chemo and things like that. Talking about chemo, her hair was falling out, and there was a moment that I was just so angry at one of my family members, because I had been telling my mother, because her hair was falling out, that she should shave it off. Not in an insensitive way, in just you know, you'll feel better if you just shaved it off and it can grow like together, you know. And she wouldn't listen to me. My mother rarely did, you know. Like I said, we had a lot of differences, and she was just like, oh, you know, I don't want to look like that. And I was like, okay, you know, you don't have to, I'm just making a suggestion. And one of my cousins, she let one of my cousins shave her head. And I was so angry about that, because I was the one in that house doing everything. Not my dad, not my cousin, not my aunts. I was the one in that house doing everything. And who was this person? Yeah, her niece or whatever the fuck. Who was this person to come in and shave my mother's head who is dying? How fucking dare you? Stay in your fucking lane. Like, I was so angry about it. But did I say anything? No. You shaved your head. Looks good. Yeah, I thought it was time. Extent of our conversation. Nobody asked me, Fatah, do you want to shave your mum's head? Nobody comforted me that every time I cleaned the house, there was just clumps of her hair. Weeks after she had passed away. Months even. Nobody fucking asked me. And I don't know how to let that anger go. I feel like I'm just not capable of letting that anger go. I feel like the anger that I felt and kept over that whole year is never gonna leave me. Like, I'm angry now just thinking about it, and now it's gonna be 7 years ago. Sorry, it's like my nose is pouring and I don't have any tissues. I'm so sorry. I feel like this anger is gonna stay with me forever, and I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. There was another incident, and this is just a general fucking incident that just made me angry, is that all these people just poured out of the woodwork because they knew my mother was dying, and I'd never seen these people. They just came to our house. I would make tea for them. I'd put some fucking biscuits, cook food for them. And it made me so angry. Like, where were you? Who are you? I don't know who you are. My mother has not seen you since she was a child. What are you doing here? And I knew what they were doing there. They were just there to show their face because they knew that my mother was dying. And then the people who turned up to the funeral was even more. And I couldn't even cry at the funeral. I don't think I did cry at the funeral. I cried when I saw my mother's body, obviously. But at the funeral, I was just angry. I remember that. I remember that feeling. And it's left such a bitter taste in my mouth for everyone that I saw that day. And I still, like, I don't know who those people are, but I can never forget their faces because I was so intensely angry at all of them. All of them who would come up to me and say, go kiss your mother, you're never going to see her again. As if I didn't already know that. As if I hadn't already paid my respects. And then there were people there who would be like, oh, so who are you? And I just wanted to scream at them, like, what the fuck are you doing here if you don't even know who I am? What the fuck are you doing here? And then there were people lecturing me like, oh, loads of people lose their mothers. Like, it's just not, like, I get it. I get it. You're stupid. But it's just not what I want to hear then. And I regret so intensely, like, not just blowing up in everybody's face. One of the first things that I was told after my mother died is that you're the mother of this household now. Not, I'm sorry you lost your mum. I'm so sorry mum's dead. Not, not just sorry, Faye. Normal things that people say to mourning people. It's, you're responsible for this now. And the way that they would comfort me is, loads of girls go through this. And it's just so fucked up. Like, it's so fucked up. Like, my mum is dead. My mum is dead. And then the years that followed and all the things that happened, like, I I didn't even have time to process that. I didn't process it. I didn't process it. I think the first time I visited my mother's grave was, now it's going to be 2 years ago, but about a year ago. I went with a friend who's, I believe it was her mother was also buried in the same place, like in the same graveyard. I went with her, and I sat there for hours just crying, telling my mom about my life, telling her I'm a disappointment, you know, how I left everybody behind. You know what the worst thing is? The worst thing isn't that my mom is dead. I truly think that she had a bad draw. I think that she didn't really enjoy her life very much. I think that my dad was awful to her. A lot of members of my family were awful to her. I don't think that her existence was particularly riveting. I think that I don't know. But I think that the worst thing about this all is I don't know what she'd think of me. Like, it's not even that I'm in denial. I just never knew my own mother, a woman who I bathed, you know, in the year that she was dying, I bathed, I clothed, I fed, and I cared for. A woman who I knew was pregnant before she knew. A woman who I told that I know you're gonna die. Enjoy your life. You know how much left you have of it. A woman who I knew loved me in her own way of saying it. I don't know her well enough to know if she'd be happy to have me as a daughter. And my family's no help. Their simple answer to everything is, yeah, she'd fucking hate you, you're a fucking whore. And I've been told that in text, and I've been told that to my face. And I don't know. And I think people can comfort me all they like. People can tell me, you know, all the things that you tell a person who talks about their dead mother in this way. That of course she loves you, and of course she's proud of you, and of course she would revel in all the things that you have achieved. And I appreciate that. I truly do. But I don't know. And I'll never know. And it's something that will haunt me forever. So yeah, that's the sad story of my mother dying. And all the things, kind of the tip of the iceberg, but all the things that I felt, and all the things I couldn't come to terms with. And I still, like, some of them I still haven't, but need to, and I'm trying. I really am, I promise. And please don't take this as a cry for help. I'm getting help. you know, in a professional sense. It's just sad, honestly. I'm gonna go. I think I've spoken enough.